We have a new member joining the Outlaw Posse today. Getting deputized to getting his badge today is Roy Miller. So welcome Roy Miller to the Outlaw Posse. And today's four horsemen shout-outs go to Zach Hamner, Brendan A&F, Snell's World, and Power T are mounted up, solid, ready to go. And they're going to help us with today's college football invasion. Bryce Wayne says, you hear that doof quarterback down in Miami said about the ACC having better defense than the SEC? What a dipshit. That's what's not getting them in. That's what, I don't know why he's saying that. That's exactly why Miami's not going to be in the playoffs. Now, SMU might boot Alabama out if Clemson upsets them. But I don't know, man. I don't think that. Let's go ahead and get to that topic now. Alabama is better choice overall than SMU, regardless. I'm not saying that because they're my team. As a matter of fact, like I said, I was content. And for people to say there's an Alabama bias out there, I don't think so. You see, if there was a bias, they would have never dropped Alabama out of the top 12. The problem is the teams in front of Alabama didn't take care of business. So if you're going to lose and crap the bed against Syracuse, Miami, and look horrid against a lot of teams this year defensively and get a win basically given to you that you shouldn't have got from Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech caught that Hail Mary in the end zone and it was overturned with insufficient evidence because referees this year have sucked across the board in every game against every team. Already went over that ad nauseum. They need some kind of program for referees, make them full-time. Make it a job that they're really invested in, not part-timers, not part-time lawyers doing refereeing or part-time whatevers doing the refereeing, that kind of deal. And there's narrative going around that the only way Alabama's not going to make it is if Clemson wins. Okay. If Clemson beats SMU, Clemson's a 9-3 team, right? And they've looked pretty horrible all year to me. They've beaten a bunch of teams that aren't really good because they're not really good. And the three teams they played that were decent, they got beat pretty handedly in two of those. Georgia blew them out 34-3, and Louisville went into Clemson and blew them out too. And then they lost a late lead to their in-state rival, South Carolina. So all they had to do was take care of business, and they went and got dropped behind Alabama. Miami, same thing. Yeah, I know Miami's got 2 losses and Alabama's got 3. But all things are not equal when it comes to wins and losses when you compare the ACC to the SEC, especially with Alabama. Alabama's 3-1 in top 25 games. Has 3 top 25 wins. Miami has 0. 0. And I think SMU's in the same boat. Like SMU has 0. SMU's resume and Miami's is eerily similar. So if they're going to drop Miami out for the same resume and the same issues, then why wouldn't they drop SMU behind Alabama? If they lose to a 9-3 Clemson team, does SMU really deserve to be in at that point? I mean, they're playing against a weaker schedule, a weaker conference. So if there was a 2-game difference in wins and losses, I could understand where y'all were coming from. But it's not just Bama hate, I think. I think there's a little Bama fear there. And I'm not saying it trying to troll y'all. I'm not saying it because I'm an Alabama fan. I'm saying it because it's pretty obvious who the better team is to me. Alabama, to me, if you put Alabama and SMU on a neutral field together, or you put Alabama and Clemson on a neutral field together, or Alabama and Miami on a neutral field together, who do you think Vegas would favor? Probably Alabama by about 10 points in every single one of them. Now, if you're going on the road and you're having to play at Miami or at SMU, maybe there'll be a little bit more of a difference. Maybe it wouldn't be but a 7-point favorite for Alabama. Regardless, Alabama would be deemed as the better team, in my opinion. Just keeping it real here, because I was of the mindset of, hey, I don't know if Alabama deserves to be in. We're not playing at our best right now. We don't look as good as some teams right now, like South Carolina, for example, who's went on a little 6-game winning streak. But then this guy said something on a show that sort of struck home for me. And he said, yes, South Carolina got hot late. But what did they do the first 6 games? And people go, well, we're going on recency. Well, recency means this season, not half the season. And they're always preaching the full body of work. So the full body of work's not your last 6 games, South Carolina fan. It's all games. And the first half of the season, you were 3-3. And you almost lost to Old Dominion. Old Dominion was within striking distance of beating South Carolina late in the 4th quarter. People forget about that. Just saying. And plus, the big tiebreaker that everybody uses, and it have been since the dawn of college, the dawn of football, period, is head-to-head. Alabama beat them head-to-head. And people are like, well, Alabama got lucky because South Carolina was within 2 points. Yeah, watch that game and tell me that Alabama wasn't a better team. They were the better team. Alabama just kept them in the game. South Carolina's lucky they were in that game. Alabama went up on them 14-0. So head-to-head, man, they got them beat. And Ole Miss beat them even worse in Columbia, 27-3. So how are you going to jump South Carolina over Alabama and Ole Miss? If anybody's got a complaint, it should be Ole Miss, not South Carolina. Fred Bagley says, and make them take their turn at the post-game presser. That's right. I assume you're talking about the referees. Yeah. If 18 and 19-year-old, in some cases 17-year-old Ryan Williams, Alabama, 18, 19-year-old young men can get up on the stage at their immature level, can get up at the press conference and have to answer questions and get badgered for the mistakes or how they performed in the game, as Fred Bagley said, why shouldn't these referees, who are sometimes 40, 50-year-old men, why shouldn't they have to answer for their performance? The coaches have to answer for their performance, and the players have to answer for their performance. The only element or piece of the game or human beings involved in the game that don't have to answer for anything are the officiating crew. And they absolutely impact the game. I'll give you an example. Alabama scored a touchdown in the 4th quarter to make it 24-10 against Oklahoma. Now, while Alabama may not have come back and won that game, it absolutely impacted that game. It would have probably been a big momentum shift for Alabama, and they probably would have made it closer. We would probably at least ended up making it 24-17. But would we have come back and won? I can't really say that. But I know it impacted the game because it impacted the score. So it absolutely impacted the game. For people to say it didn't, they're just making excuses because they want to hate on Alabama or they fear Alabama, whatever their emasculated problem is with Alabama. That's what's going on with that, because it absolutely impacted the game. These officials are impacting the game. They did it to South Carolina versus LSU. 2 phantom calls. South Carolina would be in the playoff today had the referees not impacted that game. Back to the Alabama thing, yeah, it impacted the game because the score would have been 24-10 at least. So technically, you impacted the game. You impacted the final score of the game. Would have been at least 24-10. But yeah, South Carolina probably should be in the playoff, if not for the officiating crew in the LSU South Carolina game, because they really, really screwed South Carolina. Really, really did. Bryce Wayne said it'd be Alabama by 10 over all of them if the Las Vegas Sports Lines had to do a line for Alabama versus SMU, Miami, or Clemson. With Clemson, I think it might be more. I think it might be about 14 or 15 points, maybe even 17. Terry Sleuth says cold weather doesn't matter. Well, a lot of people are saying it does. And I'm like, they said, well, the balls are harder. Blah, 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 blah. It's harder to catch them. Well, let me ask you this, man. We've had some great quarterbacks in the NFL that played in really harsh conditions. Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers. Who else? Played in cold weather. Ben Roethlisberger, Terry Bradshaw back in the day with the Steelers. Tom Brady from New England. Jim Kelly back in the 4 Super Bowl in a row era with the Buffalo Bills. Have you ever played in Buffalo? And Jim Kelly was one of the most prolific passers of all time. So come on, man. Don't give me that Frosty the Snowman's going to show up magically, help y'all win with a few fastball snowballs, or Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer is going to come down and burn our ass with his red nose. Because I don't see it happening, man. I think y'all putting a little too much into this whole cold weather stuff, because it gets cold down here. Right now in Alabama, this morning, it was about 28 degrees, 30 degrees. It's pretty damn cold this morning. And when wind starts blowing, wind chill factor is probably about 10 degrees. So we get cold weather down here in December, just like y'all do. Just like y'all do. Now, you might be able to say that about Miami, because I'm sure Notre Dame would much rather see Miami in South Bend than Alabama. They might not admit to it, but we all know it's true. We all know it's true. If you put your Bama hate or your Bama fear aside, you know it's true. But just to reiterate, SMU does not deserve to be in over Alabama, even if they lose to Clemson, man, because if you're going to drop Miami down like that, you got to drop him. And this narrative is from Reese Davis, and he's an Alabama guy, and Greg McElroy. They try too hard to pretend like they're unbiased, over the top to the point where they don't take up for Alabama when they're supposed to. You know, I grill my team, and I criticize my team all the time. You can ask anybody that's been on this channel for a while. When Alabama deserves to be criticized, I criticize the hell out of them. But when they deserve to be taken up for, I'm going to take up for them too. So, just saying. SMU, if they lose to Miami, if they lose to Clemson, well then, if you're going to drop Miami, you got to drop them down there. But the narrative is, from Reese and them, almost lost my train of thought there, the narrative is that the guy that they interview every week, the leader of the committee, is always saying, oh, we're not going to punish you for getting into the conference championship game. Well, he's just saying they're not going to punish you for losing that game if your resume matches up against whoever you're competing against. In this case, would be Alabama. But he's not saying that just because you make the title game that you're automatically going to be in either. So that's the misconception they got going on here. Because if that's the case, then I guess you should just let Clemson in too. You should let Boise State and UNLV in, and you should let Army and Tulane in. You should just let everybody that gets in the conference title game, the two teams, both of them get in. If that's what you're trying to say that he's saying. They're trying to act like it's a precedent will be set. It wouldn't be no precedent set. They've done it before. Reese and them were saying, oh, it would be unprecedented if they dropped out a participant in the championship. They've done it a lot. They've dropped Alabama out. They've dropped Georgia out. Georgia lost to Alabama last year, and they dropped Georgia out of the playoff. So don't tell me that it can't be done. There is a precedence there. It's happened before. McElroy especially. Yeah. Like I said, I understand freedom. Half off. I understand that you want to try to present yourself as unbiased, because I do that too. But you can't just not take up your team ever. Like, if Alabama's in the right, why wouldn't you say they're in the right? Just because you don't want to look biased? You're being disingenuous and untruthful at that point. You're being shady. And that's what Greg McElroy does when he does that. He's being shady, man.